Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Hello and welcome in to another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Today is Thursday, October 8th. I appreciate you guys listening out there. Hopefully everybody's week's off to a great start here. Baseball, playoff baseball's coming at you hot and heavy. The Divisional series is underway, and the way I break it down, or the way I'm looking at today's episode, is that there are 4 current divisional series and typically 4 segments here on the baseball podcast. So we might as well talk about each series during each segment. And recording this late on Wednesday night, this will allow us to talk about 3 games in each American League series and 2 games in each National League series, gearing you guys up for Thursday's action. So let's jump right into it. Let's get rolling here right off the top of the show. The day game for the last 3 days in the American League side of things has been the Houston Astros at the Oakland Athletics, and this game is taking place at Dodger Stadium. So Houston very much at home in Dodger Stadium. They enjoyed the World Series victory there in 2017, so they enjoy playing at this place. And it showed early here, right in Game 1, which had Lance McCullers Jr. going against Chris Bassett from Oakland side of things. Neither starting pitcher really lasted long in this outing. Both guys only going 4 innings. McCullers giving up 4 earned runs, 3 home runs. Bassett giving up 3 earned runs and 2 home runs. A mini home run derby broke out here in Game 1, and one guy who benefited from that was Carlos Correa, and we'll get into that in a bit more detail. First, let me take you through kind of the scoring summary here. Oakland took an early 3-0 lead through 3 innings. A couple of long balls by Davis and Murphy got them out to a nice lead. Houston answered back to tie it at 3-3. Home runs by Bregman and Correa tied it up here. Olsen answered in the bottom of the 4th inning, so through 4, it was 4-3 Oakland. A sac fly in the 5th made it 5-3, and then this is where things got interesting and where the tide turned in favor of the Houston Astros. Was in the 6th inning. Oakland's cruising along, looking at a 1-2-3 inning, and then all of a sudden they get an E6, and the inning extends, and Houston takes advantage of that and springs into a huge 2-out rally. George Springer ended up doubling, scoring a run. Then Altuve singled home a couple of runs. Brantley hit a single, and ultimately a 4-run 6th inning was the difference maker in Game 1. Houston added on after that. Correa hit his 2nd home run of the day in the 7th inning. He added a single in the 9th, and Gurriel hit a sac fly just for good measure, which ultimately gave Houston the 10-5 victory. And now back to Carlos Correa. He became the first shortstop in Major League history to have multiple multi-home run games. And I find that to be fascinating. I know the shortstop position typically is not one of extreme power offensively, and Correa hits for more power than most shortstops, but his success in the postseason to already have multiple multi-home run games and to be the first shortstop to ever do it, congratulations to Carlos. That's awesome. And his 16 playoff home runs put him in the top 10. He is now tied for 10th and he is only 26 years old. So this guy, when the lights get bright, when the postseason shines, he has absolutely been impressive and a ton of fun to watch. And I mean, this offense in Houston has really come out of nowhere. In the wild card round, they were still sputtering a bit. Obviously, they won that series 2-0. But a 10-run spot here against Oakland was certainly a surprise. And 3 runs in the 4th, like I said, 4 runs in the 6th. And when your leadoff hitter, George Springer, goes 4 for 5 at the top of your lineup, getting guys on base, moving them around, Jose Altuve finally hit the ball 2 for 4, which gave the likes of Brantley, Bregman, Tucker, Correa opportunities with guys on base, and Houston's offense took advantage of this. So the bullpen in Houston, they were fantastic. They retired 13 straight from the 6th inning to the 9th inning. Ryan Presley came on. Let's see here. No, that was game 2. I'm sorry. I got my games mixed up there. But still, no hits for the Houston bullpen. They only had 1 walk in a total of 5 innings, a total of 5 strikeouts. So very effective. Taylor, Paredes, Javier, Presley shutting it down. And Houston, game by game, gaining confidence here as we advance in the postseason. And this carried over right into Game 2. Houston took Game 2 by a score of 5-2. They sent out Valdez for Houston. He was going against Manaea from Oakland side of things, and Valdez continued to be impressive. I mean, we got to talk about him right off the jump here. This kid, and I'll call him a kid because he's very young, he threw 5 scoreless innings in the wild card round. Well, he followed that up with 7 innings of 2-run ball here against Oakland in the Divisional Series. He did give up 2 home runs. Both were solo shots, so he continued to pound the zone. Only 1 walk over 7 innings. You're going to give up a couple of long balls, but as you continue to be in the zone, you continue to mix speeds, mix pitches, you're going to be effective. And that led to a quality start from Valdez. And Houston has to be extremely happy with this because even as we come to find out here Wednesday, Zach Greinke still doesn't take the mound. He's dealing with some elbow tightness. So for this start to happen in Game 2 is excellent from Houston's perspective. Now, on the other side of things, Manaea wasn't as effective. He was only able to go 4 1/3, gave up 4 earned runs, 2 home runs, 5 hits, 2 strikeouts, only 1 walk, but he was battered by the long ball. George Springer was the guy, the star of Game 2. So in Game 1, Carlos Correa and his power was the reason ultimately they were able to get the victory. Well, in Game 2, it was the George Springer show. Once again, Oakland took an early lead, 1-0, but George Springer homered in the 3rd inning to make it 2-1 Houston. Carlos Correa added an RBI groundout. Oakland answered with a home run to make it 3-2. And then that's where home runs by Maldonado in the 5th, and then George Springer, they went back-to-back on back-to-back pitches off of 2 different pitchers, which was kind of fascinating to watch. One guy go yard, they take him out, bring the next guy in, first pitch. George Springer welcomes him into the game with a home run. So they took Manaea out, put in Petit, and he gave up the long ball to Springer. And George Springer, like I said, 4 for 5 in Game 1. 2 for 4 in Game 2, so that makes him 6 for 9 in the series. He has been absolutely impressive in his playoff home runs. He's in the top 10 all time. He's got 17 playoff home runs, which ties him for the most through 54 playoff games. So Springer, the first shortstop to have multiple multi-home run games, and now George Springer tied for first with the most home runs through 54 postseason games, and he is tied with Jim Thome and Nelson Cruz. So that is nice company to be in at the top of that list as well. And if you're looking at Oakland's side of things, I mean, Houston has just been the better team through 2 games. You're going into elimination game here on Wednesday afternoon. Your offense has really yet to show up. Oakland as a team is 14 of 62. They're batting .226 through 2 games. And in Game 2, I teased it in Game 1. It was actually Game 2 where Houston, was able to sit down 13 straight. And because of this, Oakland actually did not have an at-bat with a runner in scoring position for the entire game. Both of their runs scored came via the solo home run, and every other runner that got to first base was either stranded there or erased via the double play. It happened once early, and then again 13 straight from the 5th through the 8th. They got the leadoff hitter on in the 9th inning against Ryan Presley. He was then able to get a fly ball and induce a double play to end the game and make it 5-2. And Houston wins their first 4 playoff games for the first time and in a handful of years here. I believe they did it again in 2016 or maybe it was 2017. I don't have that stat in front of me, but very impressive. And a lot of Houston's players are talking about, hey, once we realized what the regular season was all about, we were just preparing for the postseason, trying to get to this moment, and nobody cares what you did in the regular season. If you show up and play and party in the postseason, it's still going to be a good time. So, Game 3, an elimination game for Oakland. Let's see if they're able to bounce back. On Wednesday afternoon, Oakland was in fact able to stave off elimination and force a Game 4 in this series. It was another offensive battle, offensive showdown between these two clubs with a final score of 9-7 in favor of the Oakland Athletics. And it was a bit of role reversal here in Game 3 because in Games 1 and 2, it was the Houston Astros mounting the comebacks against the A's. Well, here in Game 3, it was Houston that got out to a 7-4 lead before ultimately blowing it by giving up 3 runs in the 7th and 2 more in the 8th inning. So running down the game here, the A's hit 5 home runs. La Stella homered in the 1st. Cahan and Olsen homered in the 4th. Simeon homered in the 5th. Pinder had the big 3-run blast in the 7th, and it was just fascinating to watch the ball fly out of the ballpark once again for these two teams. And both pitchers did not perform well again here in Game 3. Urquidy only went 4 1/3, gave up 5 hits, 4 earned runs, all of them on home runs. Solo shots from Urquidy over the course of 4 1/3. He had given up 1 home run to a left-handed hitter all year. And then now here in the divisional round, he gives up 2 to both lefties that are in the lineup. And then on the other side, Jesus Luzardo for Oakland, he gave up 4 earned runs in 4 1/3, giving up 2 long balls himself. And then Petit came in, and he only went 1/3 of an inning, giving up 3 hits and 3 runs. So Houston knocked him around, ultimately before Diekman came in to settle things down. And then Hendricks got the 3-inning win, actually. Normally he's used in save situations, but ultimately 3 innings, only giving up 1 hit. That one came, I believe, in the top of the 9th inning, but he was able to work around it, and 4 strikeouts. So he did throw 37 pitches, which ultimately means he's unavailable tomorrow. But after he went his 2nd inning, he still would have been unavailable tomorrow, so it only made sense as the A's manager to run him back out there because when he comes back, it'll be the same time. So utilize your best pitcher as often as you can for as long as you can, and I had no problem with extending Hendricks to 3 innings at this point. And Houston's bullpen was rolling along. They had been cruising the past couple of games before James ultimately blew the save, giving up 3 runs. It was the 3-run home run to Pinder in the top of the 7th. Once again, that was a bit of the backbreaker, tying things up. And then ultimately in the 8th inning, scoring off of Raleigh, a couple of runs, a sac fly, and a couple of other hits, singles across the board here. But so where do we stand after 3 games? Currently 2-1 Houston. Of course, heading to Game 4. Montas is scheduled to go for Oakland in Game 4, and there is no word yet on a Houston starter, which to me lends it to believe that Zach Greinke will continue to be unavailable as he is battling some elbow discomfort. Dusty Baker did make us aware of that, so I don't think we're going to be seeing him anytime here moving forward, which means you're going to get a bit of a bullpen game from Houston's side of things. Once again, Javier, Paredes, Shrub, Taylor, Valdez would not be available because he just went. Urquidy would not be available. McCullers would not be available. So everybody else on the list, James, Taylor, Shrub, Presley, Paredes, Javier are most likely to go here in Game 4. But this is where you start to get into trouble if you're Houston, and you're going to have to rely on that offense that has suddenly gotten hot here in the divisional round. I mean, if you're looking at some of the statistics for the playoffs, Correa's hitting .438, Kyle Tucker's hitting 350, George Springer's hitting 318, and then Bregman, Brantley, and Altuve all between 250 and 300. And Correa with the 3 postseason home runs and 7 RBIs is leading the team. And this offense has come out of nowhere really to spark these guys. And with the pitching staff in as much flux as it is, Greinke dealing with the injury, even if he goes, it'll probably be short-lived. It's going to be an uphill battle for Houston, and they're going to have to win one of these games, I think, via the score of 8-5 or 9-6. So on the other side, Oakland through 6 playoff games, they're being led by Simeon hitting 391, Pinder hitting 389, and Chris Davis hitting 300 on the dot. Davis leads the team with 3 home runs. Pinder now leads the team with 7 RBIs after his 3-run shot. And then on the pitching side of things, like I said, Manaea will go for them here in the next game, and he struggled. He's 0-1 with an 8.3 ERA here in the postseason, so they'll look for him to bounce back and have a nice outing. But to kind of update my prediction here, ultimately I think it's going to be Astros in 5. I did take Oakland, I believe. I didn't see this Houston offense rebounding and putting up the statistics and the numbers that they are in the home run category. I mean, these teams have combined for 18 home runs here so far in this series. That's just unbelievable, and it looks like 7 of them were hit in Game 3. So the ball continues to be flying out in L.A., day games, warm weather. I expect this to continue, and ultimately I do like Houston's lineup and their depth slightly better than Oakland's moving forward. So if we get 2 more shootouts, I think Houston will be able to win one of the 2 and ultimately pull it out in 5 games to advance to their 4th straight American League Championship Series. But that'll wrap things up here for the first segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll pause now for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows, and when we come back, we'll talk about the other series in the American League, Yankees-Rays. Where are they at? Stick around, find out.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back, and thanks again for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Today is Thursday, October 8th. Hopefully you guys are having a great week. If you haven't done so yet, please check us out on social media. Head to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Follow both the GSMC Baseball Podcast as well as the GSMC Podcast Network. We certainly appreciate it here. That helps us continue to grow, continue to spread the word within the podcast network. As podcasts as a whole, the consumption time has continued to grow as the pandemic is being experienced worldwide. So the more we grow, the more you guys continue to listen. We would certainly appreciate it, as well as wherever you're listening to this, whether it's Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, however many platforms that podcasts are now available. Please like, rate, and review the podcast. That helps within the algorithm, within that world. Continue to help us grow, get into the top new shows, news and noteworthy, all of that good stuff that you guys don't have to worry about. All you can do is pull up your screen, hit that like button, give us 5 stars, and it'll help us out more than you know. But we just wrapped up our conversation around Houston and Oakland and where they currently stand. Now we're going to transition into the other American League Series, and that is the New York Yankees versus the Tampa Bay Rays in an AL East matchup here in the divisional round. And these games are taking place in San Diego at the Padres Stadium. So continue to play these neutral site games. And right off the top there in Game 1, we got a fantastic pitching matchup. Garrett Cole going against Blake Snell. But ultimately, it ended up being a little bit more one-sided than the average fan would have anticipated. Blake Snell really struggled for Tampa Bay. He went 5 innings, gave up 4 runs, 3 home runs in the span of 5 innings. It really was a bit of a home run derby here as well within the Yankees and Rays game. I know I said that in the first segment with Houston and Oakland, but the ball is flying here in the postseason, and it was a bit of back and forth until ultimately New York was able to pull away late in the game. So bringing you guys kind of up to date on the scoring summary, New York was able to get out to an early 1-0 lead. Tampa answered with a home run in the bottom of the first. New York home run in the third. Choi homered to give Tampa Bay a 3-2 lead through 4 innings. And then this is where ultimately New York turned things on and scored the final 7 runs of the ball game. So Choi homered in the fourth. Then ultimately Higasaka, he tied things up at 3. He is Garrett Cole's personal catcher. Actually, he's the backup catcher for New York, so you're probably like, why is he in the lineup? Well, his relationship with Garrett Cole goes all the way back to their prep school days or their travel ball AAU days. They were both Southern California kids, grew up. Both of them were actually drafted by the New York Yankees. Higasaka, he went pro right out of high school, and Garrett Cole, of course, opted to go to UCLA for his college career. But when you're getting contributions from your 9-hole hitter going 2 for 4 with a home run, you're usually lined up to do some good things that day. And he tied things up at 3. Judge followed that up with a home run right after him, a line drive out to center field to give them a 4-3 lead. And then ultimately in the 9th inning, Hicks singled in a run, and then Giancarlo Stanton opened things wide up with a grand slam. And this grand slam was newsworthy as well because this made the Yankees the first team to have postseason grand slams in back-to-back games. So their offense, of course, has been extremely impressive here in the postseason through 3 games at this point. They have 31 runs in 3 games, including 11 home runs, and 4 of them came in Game 1, so averaging over 10 runs per game here in the postseason. Even with the lack of pitching staff, that's going to be tough to compete with New York, and they sent another message here in Game 1. But Garrett Cole was good, not great, but he was excellent when he needed to be. Once again, in that 5th inning, in the bottom of the 5th, once New York was able to take a 4-3 lead, Tampa was able to get a rally going, but Garrett Cole fired in a fastball at 100.1 miles an hour to strike out a gentleman and end the 5th, and this was Garrett Cole's first 100-mile-an-hour fastball of the 2020 season. So you know his adrenaline was rolling. You know he was feeling good. And he was able to get out of that jam, ends up going 6 innings, giving up 3 runs, but ultimately limits the damage. And then the bullpen of Green, Britton, and Sessa was able to shut things down after Stanton's grand slam in the 9th really extended things. And this led right into Game 2. Once again, no off days here in the postseason. So the next day, the next matchup, you had Tyler Glasnow going for Tampa Bay. And then you had the Yankees getting extremely cute on the pitching side of things, basically for everybody, because they went with Garcia, a right-hander, 21 years old, making his first postseason start, and ultimately he was used as the opener because he hadn't thrown in 10 days, so he wasn't sharp, he wasn't great, but Aaron Boone, it comes out after the game, was trying to play a matchup style of game because the Rays play a lot of matchup baseball. If you got a righty, we'll start lefties and vice versa. And because of this, he ran out the right-handed Garcia, ultimately to get Tampa to start more of their left-handed hitters, then going to J.A. Happ in the 2nd inning. However, the communication internally either wasn't great or wasn't done so at all, because J.A. Happ said that he was surprised that he went in after only 1 inning. And if all things were equal and he had his way of things, that he would have eventually started the game. He would much rather like to be out there from the jump, get into the rhythm. It's more difficult to get into a bullpen routine when you don't know if the guy's going 1 innings or 2 innings. And if he would have shut him down 1, 2, 3 in 12 pitches, you probably would have ran him out there for the 2nd. But because he struggles, ultimately has a 27-pitch first inning and gives up a long ball to Arozarena to give Tampa a 1-0 lead. He goes right to J.A. Happ, who he really struggles. So, I mean, I'm saying all of this where he was talking about communication because he didn't perform well. He went 2 2/3, gave up 4 earned runs, 2 home runs. He had 3 walks, had trouble finding the zone. In the bottom of the second inning, Zunino hit a 2-run home run. Margot hit a home run off of him in the 5th. In 6th inning, the Rays were able to score again. And the only reason that the Yankees were in this game at all is because Giancarlo Stanton hit a fastball as far as I've seen a ball hit in playoff baseball. And he hit it off of Tyler Glasnow. It was one of those 98-mile-an-hour fastballs, middle in, lower in the zone, and Stanton got every bit of it. So if you haven't seen the highlight of that home run, please do yourself a favor and check that out because it is an outstanding visual. But that 3-run dinger made it 5-4 before ultimately the Rays added a couple of runs to make it 7-4. And then Fairbanks was able to close things out before giving up a run in the 9th inning for a 7-5 victory. But Game 2 didn't come without controversy. As always here in the playoffs, Tampa evens things up 1-1, but New York set a postseason strikeout record, and not in a good way. So Tampa Bay pitching struck out New York batters 18 times in this game. I mean, everybody in the lineup but Hicks struck out at least one time. And there were 6 hitters out of the 9 that struck out multiple times. And the controversy comes in because C.B. Buckner behind the plate, his zone was less than accurate if you're going off of, sabermetrics and the box that they like to put up there or where they're able to track the pitches. Because he was giving 1, 2, sometimes even 3 inches off the outside part of the plate, and Tampa, knowing this, was able to take advantage of it. Now, he was consistent for both teams, so the argument out there is, hey, Happ, Garcia, Otavio, you guys got to utilize this the same way that Glasnow, Castillo, and Anderson were able to utilize it. Their arms just don't have the consistency and the command that Tampa's roster does. So if you get into a situation like this where an umpire is giving maybe a bit more on the corners, that's going to be advantage Tampa Bay because their pitchers are going to be able to locate their pitches on a more consistent basis than the Yankees will. And only 5 runs for New York, nothing shabby here once again. That'll be 36 runs in 4 games, so still averaging 9 runs a game offensively, but a huge win in Game 2 for Tampa Bay. That ties up the series, hitting into a critical Game 3, where ultimately the winner of Game 3 in a best-of-5 typically wins that series more often than not. In Tampa, they were able to stay hot and ultimately won Game 3 on Wednesday night as well. Charlie Morton, he was your winning pitcher, 5 innings, 2 runs, 1 of them earned. It was his 5th straight postseason victory. So Charlie Morton, who hadn't pitched in 10 days, came out and looked sharp and was able to get the victory. And he was able to escape a jam in the 3rd inning. Ultimately, he had bases loaded twice and only gave up 1 run on a sacrifice fly. At this point, the Yankees made it 1-1 in the 3rd inning. Well, then in the top of the 4th, Kiermaier unloaded on a 3-run home run off a hanging breaking ball from Tanaka. This came after a controversial ball 4. It could have been a strike him out, throw him out, strike 3, throwing the guy out, stealing second base, but it was called ball 4, so a guy on first and second, next pitch, hanging slider, hit out of the ballpark. And then Arozarena, he went yard in the 5th inning to make it 5-1 Tampa Bay. Hicks brought the Yankees back to make it 5-2 before Perez homered and Choi doubled, ultimately to make it 8-2. And then Giancarlo Stanton did his best to keep it close, and he hit a late-inning home run in the bottom of the 8th inning to get it to 8-4, but that was ultimately your final score. And once again, Tanaka, 4 innings, 5 runs, 2 home runs. He was followed up by Green, who went 1 inning and allowed 2 runs on 1 home run. And then Sessa, Nelson, and King finished things out for Tampa. But the bullpen for Tampa Bay was good. Curtis, and then McClanahan and Castillo closed things out. So it was another exciting game offensively. 8 runs scored again by Tampa. New York's offense kind of came back to earth here, only scoring 5 and 4 runs in the last 2 games, and Tampa took advantage of that. They hit 3 home runs in Game 3 after they hit 4 home runs in Game 2, so 7 in their last 2 victories, and they have now pushed the Yankees to the brink. And ultimately, when you're looking at this from a Yankees fan's perspective, based on how everybody's doing this postseason, LeMahieu 1 for 4, Judge, Hicks. I mean, Hicks is performing very well. He's hitting .556. Stanton stays locked in, hitting .417. But the rest of the people up and down the lineup continue to struggle here recently in the last couple of games. And now you're probably going to see Yarborough. He would make the most sense from Tampa Bay's perspective. Now, potentially, you could get an opener and then go to Yarborough. They haven't announced it officially who the starter's going to be as of late Wednesday night here. So that's my best guess, going with Yarborough. And then New York, conversely, they're going to counter with Montgomery, who has been up and down this year. He's a younger kid. He's going to be in his biggest start because right now you're down 2-1. If Montgomery can get Game 4, you're absolutely going to get Garrett Cole on short rest in Game 5. Tampa Bay would most likely counter with Snell on short rest and kind of go for a more of a bullpen style of game for the 5th and decisive game. But Tampa Bay is really showing you why they won 40 games during the regular season and why they were able to handle New York throughout the course of the regular season as well, because this lineup is getting contributions from people who you wouldn't expect. Kiermaier out of the 8-hole, 2 for 4, 3 RBIs. You had a Rosarena. He's hitting cleanup for him, hitting .667 here in the postseason. It's been fantastic. Then you got Wendy and third base, 3 for 5, hitting .545. So that's a guy's name that I didn't even know until this playoffs and watching these games and watching him perform admirably. So I think Tampa has the advantage here in this series. Of course, we just touched on Houston being up 2-1 in their series, so that lends me to believe that in the American League, we're looking at Tampa Bay, Houston in the ALCS. I mean, honestly, looking into these series, Yankees, Oakland certainly could have been a possibility here, but if I had to put the odds on one or the other making a comeback, I trust the Yankees' offense more than I trust Oakland's offense, so I think New York could ultimately bounce back and push them to a decisive 5th game where you get Garrett Cole and you got to feel good about yourself. So if you're Tampa, a huge Game 4 coming up here on Thursday night, and you're going to want to close this thing out because you do not want to get back to Garrett Cole. But that'll wrap things up here for the second segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We'll pause now for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows, but when we come back, we'll talk about the National League. We'll get into Marlins and Braves. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Stick around, everyone.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. It is Thursday, October 8th, and we are cruising along here in the divisional round. We are going to transition now into the National League, but before we do that, I am going to ask another favor. If you guys haven't listened to the other shows within the podcast network, check those out, because if you're into playoff baseball, you're probably into football, fantasy football, maybe you're into music, politics, news, relationships, I don't know, whatever it is, but there is a show for you within the podcast network. So just type in GSMC into the search bar. You'll have a plethora of opportunities to sort through there, and it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of talented hosts within the network here that I network with. So do yourself a favor, check some of those out. If you're looking to pass the time, get some background noise while you're working from home, there's a show for you out there within the network. But back to baseball here, back to the National League. Let's start off by talking about the Miami Marlins against the Atlanta Braves in a NL East matchup in the divisional round. This one is taking place down in Houston at the Astros Stadium. So once again, neutral site fields across the board. It's kind of fascinating to see. But Miami versus Atlanta taking place in Houston. And boy, oh boy, this one did not take long to get very interesting. And I talked on Monday's preview pod about how there was bad blood in both of the American League matchups. Now, we haven't seen any of that come to play here through a couple of games, but on the National League side of things, well, it showed its head early. And let's kind of walk through it here, but in the bottom of the first inning, Alcantara's throwing for Miami. Max Fried's going for Atlanta, but Alcantara gives up a home run to Acuna Jr. that goes 428. Not a cheapie. He admires it, enjoys his thing. I love it. Tatis, everybody, they've all been doing it all postseason. Well, Miami seemed to take a bit of exception to it, because at the point here where he comes back up in the third inning, the surroundings had changed. Miami was able to answer back against Fried. Rojas homered in the second. In the third inning, Cooper and Anderson both had RBI hits. So Miami had a 4-1 lead at this point when Acuna came back to bat. And ultimately, Alcantara drilled him with 98. And, of course, after the game, you get all the interviews. The scouting report from Alcantara, he says that they have to pitch inside on Acuna. They're trying to do it all the time. That's where you can't let him get out over the zone. It got away from you. You're just trying to pitch inside. And Ronald Acuna is having the conversation that I became aware of, where the Marlins have hit Acuna 5 times in his career thus far, and no other team has hit him more than twice. So clearly something going on there in the history between the Marlins and Acuna, because, yeah, even if you want to pitch inside, well, they're the only team that typically goes a little bit too far inside each time when this seems to take place. So they ended up drilling him in the third inning. He took a couple of steps towards the mound, ended up going down to first base. Both sides were warned, which made Atlanta's manager go bananas because, of course, they didn't do anything wrong. And now if they try to pitch inside and something gets away, their pitcher's going to be ejected when Alcantara can stay in the game. And, but you don't want to have a quick hook and just throw somebody out right away. So it's a tough position for the umpires to be in, because I see logic behind all arguments, which usually isn't the case when it comes to that type of thing. But it's a tough situation. Things kind of stabilize themselves. But ultimately, that hit by pitch, quote unquote, woke up the Atlanta offense. Right after that, they were able to put together back-to-back doubles to score a couple of runs to get back within 4-3. Now, after that third inning, things did stabilize, and Alcantara was able to settle down, and ultimately he got through 6 innings. But before, he wasn't able to get touched up in the 7th. So he went 6+, giving up 5 runs when through 6 innings. He had allowed 3 because in the 7th inning, Ozuna got to him, and then ultimately they made the move to Garcia out of the bullpen, and this one backfired for Miami. Garcia came in, gave up home runs to Travis d'Arnaud and Dansby Swanson, and it went from a 4-4 game to a 9-4 game in 1/2 an inning. He came in, Garcia, he only got 1 out. He was charged with 3 runs. Hoyt came in, gave up the other home run. Garcia only gave up one of the home runs. Hoyt gave up another home run. But the bullpen in Miami ultimately let them down. And Atlanta's offense over time was able to wear them down, and get the long ball. So the home run has been extremely prevalent here in the postseason. I mean, in the American League, the Yankees, the Astros, both of those squads, Tampa Bay as well, Houston. I mean, even Oakland's only scoring their runs on home runs. But it's really been the difference here in the postseason. And when it comes to Atlanta, if you're looking at this as a Braves fan and heading into Game 2, kind of wrapping up Game 1, but you're looking at a line where Max Fried only went 4 innings and gave up 4 earned runs, and you ultimately win the ball game. I mean, that's something that you'll take as an Atlanta fan because your rotation is not very deep. So you would assume if you're not getting a good outing from Fried, you're typically not going to get a good outcome. But the offense coming through with the likes of Acuna, 2 hits, Ozuna had 2 hits, D'Arnaud was 3 for 3 with 4 RBIs, and then Austin Riley out of the 9-hole with a couple of hits. So 12 hits offensively in total for the Braves, leading to the 9 runs in what was a very impressive Game 1 victory, because Miami had come in feeling good about themselves, and the offense to wake up based on what was happening with Acuna is going to be fun to watch here. But let's transition now to Game 2, where Atlanta was once again able to come out victorious, and this was really the only game of the divisional round, after looking at all of the scores, breaking down all of these different situations, where this was a bit of a pitcher's duel here in Game 2 down in Houston between the Marlins and the Braves, because the 2-0 final, and honestly, the Braves only had 4 hits and the Marlins had 3. This was a pretty boring baseball game to watch, but it was an impressive showing from the pitching staff. Ian Anderson continues to be dynamite for the Atlanta Braves. After a scoreless outing against the Reds in the wild card series, he followed that up here with 5 2/3 scoreless once again. 1 walk, 8 strikeouts, 94 pitches. He was very effective and very impressive. And he became the 3rd Brave ever with consecutive playoff games that were scoreless with 8 or more strikeouts. So that's an impressive stat from a kid who clearly is not overwhelmed by the moment and has continued to perform into the postseason. Because this 2-0 victory, I took my eye away from it here just a minute, but I then realized the Braves have now pitched a shutout in 3 out of 4 playoff games. And the conversation or the preview and all the pundits and experts and everybody talking says, hey, this lineup is deep. It's the pitching staff that you need to be worried about. Well, throwing up a goose egg in 3 out of 4 games is pretty much shutting everybody up, telling you, hey, we got arms, we got talent, especially at the front end when it comes to the rotation, and then into this bullpen, because those are the arms that they've been able to utilize time after time. Once again, Anderson goes 5 2/3. You get 1 out from O'Day. Then you go to Matzik, Smith, and Melanson, and not one of them allowed a base runner over the course of the last 3 innings. Matzik, 16 pitches, 1 strikeout. Smith, 11 pitches, 1 strikeout. And Melanson, 13 pitches and 1 strikeout. Everybody has a 0.00 ERA across the board here for Atlanta being utilized in this game. And that staff and the way they've used them is, very impressive. I mean, if you pull up their team statistics and you just look at the pitching side of things, I mean, let's go from worst to best ERA. They have 2 guys who have given up a run. Max Fried has given up 4 runs in 11 innings, and then after him, it's Chris Martin, who's allowed 1 run in 3 innings. Anderson, scoreless, Green, Matzik, Melanson, Minter, O'Day, and Smith have all yet to yield a run here in the postseason. And that's a good thing, because the Braves offense as a whole has really yet to get going. I mean, if you pull up their playoff statistics across the board, obviously their 2 runs here in Game 2, they both came via the long ball once again. First off, by Dansby Swanson, second by Travis D'Arnaud. And this is an amazing statistics, because this was the first game of the day Wednesday, and then after the Athletics and Astros games, the teams that had hit more home runs were 18-0 in the postseason. If that doesn't tell you we are in the year of the long ball, I don't know what does, because Atlanta offensively, they got one guy hitting. That's Travis d'Arnaud. Ronald Acuna is hitting .316, Austin Riley .286, but you got Albies hitting $188, Swanson hitting $188, Ozuna's hitting .176, and Freddie Freeman all the way down at .071. He is only 1 for 14 here in the postseason. He does have 4 walks to only 1 strikeout, so continuing to put together quality at-bats. But offensively, they're going to need this team to show up in the next round if they do advance beyond the Marlins, because no matter who they're going to face, whether it's the Dodgers or the Padres, either of those teams is going to be able to hit the ball, so Atlanta's going to have to keep up with them offensively. And then from the Marlins' perspective, a bit of a surprise on the mound. They went with Lopez instead of Sixto Sanchez, which I can understand the more I thought about it. You don't want to go hard-throwing righty after hard-throwing righty. Alcantara is high 90s, as we all know, having discussed what happened with him and Acuna. So I don't think you want to follow that up with another high 90s right-hander in Sanchez. So that's kind of a bit perplexing, I guess, when you go with Lopez, because Sanchez is your second-best arm. So you don't go with your second-best arm because you want to mix up the looks, but ultimately, I don't think you benefit. So Lopez, he did have a solid outing. I mean, I can't knock my guy. He went 5 innings, giving up the 2 runs, the 2 solo home runs I talked about. He didn't walk anybody. He had 7 strikeouts, and he was really let down by his offense. So he wasn't the problem here today. Just kind of looking at it going, man, I don't know if Sixto's out there if we're throwing up zeros going into extra innings baseball here, because Boxberger and Kinsler, they were good down the stretch out of the bullpen for the Marlins, but offensively only having 3 hits, and they really only threatened 3 different times in this ball game. They had a hit in the first where they were able to get runners on first and second. They had a hit in the fourth, which was a double, and then another hit in the sixth. Then after an error, a walk, they actually left the bases loaded in the 6th inning, which was really their last time threatening, and that's when O'Day was able to come in and get that 1 out and get out of the bases loaded jam. So, again, the Atlanta bullpen, fantastic. There was no carryover from Game 1 in this series. I was surprised to see that heading into Game 2. Of course, everybody knows now what happened with Acuna and all of that moving forward, but both teams behaved themselves, so nothing out of the ordinary there in regards to Game 2. But the Marlins as a whole here in the playoffs, offensively, they need some guys to pick it up, because Starling Marte only played in 1 game. He was 2 for 4, but beyond him, Sierra, who is replacing him in center field, is 3 for 9, hitting .333, but all the rest of the regulars, Anderson, Berti, Rojas, Cooper, Joyce, Aguilar's hitting .176, Dickerson's hitting .067. He's 1 for 15 in the postseason. It's just not going to get it done when you have a young pitching staff that you're trying to carry and trying to basically stay afloat moving forward against a very good Atlanta Braves team. You're going to have to hit the baseball. You're going to have to score runs like the rest of these guys. I mean, the scores in the Oakland series, the Yankees series, and even the Padres have been certainly higher than the average score over the past couple of postseasons. But Game 3 coming up on Thursday, Sixto Sanchez goes against Kyle Wright. So the Marlins will look to stave off elimination. I think Sixto, certainly it'll be his biggest moment of the year, but he's been very impressive in regards to his outing. He got hot there early on, had an opportunity to possibly be Rookie of the Year before coming back to earth, people seeing him a second time through, making some adjustments. But the Braves here, they're a team that's seen him a couple of times. So it will be fascinating to see what type of plan of attack Sanchez puts together against these guys, if he continues to keep Freeman in the rut, in the bit of a slump that he is, or if they are finally able to break out offensively. And then on the other side, if the Marlins can score enough runs to win a game, because the Braves pitching 3 out of 4 shutouts, it's certainly impressive. And the Marlins are going to need 4, 5, 6 runs to win a ball game. But that'll wrap it up here for the 3rd segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik, as always. I appreciate you guys listening in. What we're going to do now, we'll pause one last time here for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister stations. And then when we come back, we'll wrap it up talking Padres Dodgers. Now, it's late Wednesday here, so we got one game for sure to discuss, and then most of a second game. I'm trying to keep it as late as we can here. We're still getting up, going to work, dealing with my daughter, and all of that good stuff. But stick around, everybody. We'll pause one last time here. We'll be right back.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I appreciate you guys listening. It is Thursday, October 8th. Hopefully you guys are having a great week out there. We are now talking about the Dodgers and Padres series. We are getting into the marquee series in the National League. I mean, out of the four series, if you really break it down, it's Rays-Yankees in the American League side of things that, features both marquee teams. And then here on the National League, it's Padres and Dodgers, because these two teams, although they're matching up here in the divisional round, actually had the two best records in all of baseball, or at least on the National League side of things, So this one is one that we're all looking forward to. And unfortunately, it got off to a bit of a clunky start in Game 1. I mean, as a gentleman who's on the East Coast, Eastern Standard Time, these 9 o'clock first pitch games are difficult. 2.5-year-old, got to deal with work, daycare. It's tough to stay up until 1 o'clock in the morning to watch the ends of these games. So what I typically do is record them and then watch them the following day. That way I'm up to date and know what's going on for you guys here within the podcast. But this game itself, oh my goodness, was it just frustrating and boring to watch for the first, I'd say 5 innings. I mean, even 6 innings. So nothing really happened in the first 3 innings. Both teams were scoreless until the 4th inning, when Austin Nola was able to single home a run to make it 1-0. And then L.A. answered back with a run of their own, scoring on an error from San Diego's side of things. Jake Cronenworth had a throwing error, so it was 1-1 through 5 innings. The Dodgers did not have a hit at this point. However, they still had 9 base runners at this point in the game, because Padres pitching had walked 9 hitters. And this gets back to the big story of the game, of course, which is Mike Clevinger exiting with the same injury that kept him out of the wild card round. So Clevinger started the game. He went the first inning, scoreless inning. He did have a strikeout, but then he went back out for the second inning, and ultimately his first 2 pitches were both 5 miles an hour less than their average velocities. I think he threw a fastball in the mid-80s instead of low 90s, and then a slider in the low 80s instead of the high 80s, and this was after 3 walks in the first inning. So ultimately he exited the game with his continued elbow impingement injury. And touching on that in a little bit more detail here, it was certainly surprising after the game when communication from both Clevinger and the team was that of, we are not completely shutting him down. I mean, honestly, when I saw that, my first initial reaction was, hey, they tried to push him, made things worse. Now is he going to need Tommy John surgery and be out for all of next summer? Now, there is a lot of risk-reward when it comes to this conversation, and the doctors and teams internally will have a lot more information than I do right now. But if there's any chance for this injury to worsen and extend the rehab time or repair time, I don't know if I'm running him back out there. But if it is one of those where it is a bone impingement and the surgery will just be to remove a bone spur and it's a pain deal and not a health deal, then I think they may continue to run him out. Because if you can get one good inning, maybe an out or two, he's a little herky-jerky, you can throw him out there for a strikeout, then potentially he may not be done. But if it was one of these ligament type of issues where it's hanging on, they're trying to strengthen it, and then ultimately it could pop, I don't think the way to go is to run him back out there, especially what you just gave up for him. He's under contract moving forward. You don't want to turn a potential slight injury in an offseason of rehab into a major injury and, 14, 15 months of rehab going all the way to 2022. But Clevinger was removed. Johnson came in, scoreless inning in a third. Weathers a scoreless inning in a third. Adams and Hill were both scoreless. But once again, the 9 walks, it ended up being 10 total as a team for Padres pitching. So the Dodgers didn't have a hit through 5 innings, but did have 9 walks. Well, they finally were able to break the dam, so to speak, in the 6th inning when they got all 4 of their hits in the same inning. And Seager got a hit, which scored a run. Turner singled. Bellinger reached on an infield single. And then Max Muncy scored on a wild pitch to make it 5-1. So there's a couple of different ways to look at this if you're a Dodgers fan. And that is that your offense continues to struggle, and yet you continue to win baseball games. And with the likes of Mookie Betts, Seager, Turner, Muncy, Smith, Bellinger, Pollock, Peterson, Taylor, I mean a name of names going 1 through 9 down the list, you're either thinking, oh my God, we're going to struggle and this is going to catch up to us and we'll be eliminated, or we're still winning. Imagine what happens when a few of these guys get hot in the playoffs. We're going to be unstoppable. And I tend to fall more on the latter side of that, because when you're looking at San Diego, without a 100% Clevinger and without a 100% Lamet, I don't think they have an opportunity against this Dodgers squad, which means they're then going to have to go up against Atlanta, and that's where the offense is going to have to show up, because the offense in Atlanta with their pitching staff, they're going to compete a bit more than bullpen game after bullpen game from San Diego, because for the 3rd consecutive game, the Padres used at least 8 pitchers. So basically, they're running guys out 1 inning after 1 inning after 1 inning because they don't have the starters, or even when they did, Paddock and Davies in the wild card round, neither of those guys were able to give them any length, and that's going to be huge going into Game 2, because you're using 8 guys again with no off days. You're going to need your starter to extend, and that'll be fascinating to see if that's able to happen in Game 2. But the pitching side of the Dodgers, a slight hiccup. Walker Buehler made his first start in a handful of days. He's been dealing with blisters all summer. He's really struggled. Now, he wasn't touched up for many runs. He only gave up 1 run in the 4 innings, but he did have 4 walks to go along with 8 strikeouts. So very boom or bust. He had to use 95 pitches to get through those 4 innings, which ultimately made L.A. go to Dustin May for 2 innings. He was much more effective. He only threw 27 pitches in those 2 innings, got 3 strikeouts, and ultimately got the victory. With all of those runs being scored in the bottom of the 6th, he was still your active pitcher before Gonzalez, Treinen, and Jansen shut things down. So a 5-1 victory in Game 1 for the Dodgers, where they only had 4 hits, but 10 walks from San Diego pitching pretty much handed that to them on a platter. So frustrating start from San Diego. Their manager was ultimately tossed, Tingler, arguing balls and strikes in the 6th inning, so he didn't finish the game, trying to get these guys fired up and rallied to bounce back for a Game 2, because if you go down 2-0 to the Dodgers, and with the way your pitching staff's lined up, this one's pretty much done if you're the San Diego Padres. Now, as I'm recording here late Wednesday night, we are creeping ever so closer to midnight here. Currently, it is the bottom of the 8th inning in the Dodgers-Padres Game 2, and the Dodgers currently have the lead 6-3 in what has been a very entertaining ball game thus far. I mean, back and forth. Honestly, this was the first game of this series I was really able to dial into, and the stars have been out. They have been performing. It's been fantastic. And It started early with the Padres getting out to a 1-0 lead in the second inning. Myers doubled to deep center to score Pham after Pham had singled earlier in the inning, but then ultimately Clayton Kershaw was able to work out of a jam, runner on second, nobody out, and he got the next three guys in order. So you were looking at that in the second inning going, okay, is this where the floodgates open up here a little bit? Clayton Kershaw may have another rough start if they can string together a couple of hits here early in the ball game, and ultimately it didn't come to be. He was able to settle down, get out of the inning, and only allow the one run. And the Dodgers, they came back in the bottom half of the third. They put up a 3-spot in this half inning. Ultimately, a handful of hits. Pollock singled, Barnes singled. They both scored on a Seager double. And then Max Muncy singled to score Seager to make it 3-1 Los Angeles through 3 innings. And now Zach Davies was on the mound for the Padres here in Game 2. I should probably announce that here early as we're communicating it because we didn't know who would start. We knew Clevinger had the arm issues. Dinelson Lamet is still dealing with some elbow issues. So Zach Davies, and he was as good as you're going to get from Davies. I mean, honestly, 5 innings, 4 runs. That's about as well as you can have hoped for against this Dodger lineup that continues to just plug away and mash. And now that they're getting more locked in and they're getting, I would say hotter here in the postseason, it's going to be difficult to continue to defeat this team. So 4-1 here, Dodgers, until we get to the 6th inning. And then this is where we have some fun. I mean, Clayton Kershaw in the 6th, he's cruising along. 5 innings, only 1 run. Well, he gets to the top of the 6th, and Manny Machado and Eric Hosmer greet him with back-to-back home runs to make it a 4-3 ball game. And again, Kershaw, he's getting to the end of the rope here. You know, he's a handful of pitches in. Is he going to slow down? I don't know. Well, no, he stabilizes. He gets out of the 6th inning, and ultimately they're able to get to the Dodgers bullpen. But now that we're heading to the bottom of the 6th, where the Dodgers were unable to answer, we got ourselves a ball game here in the 7th in a 4-3 game. And this is where the play of the day was made. This is where the play of the postseason has been made thus far. There were 2 outs and a runner on first base. Grisham was hit by a pitch, so it's a 4-3 ball game. Gratterall was brought in to face Tatis Jr., and ultimately Gratterall balks on the first pitch, so you move the runner up to scoring position in a 4-3 game, and Tatis got a 99-mile-an-hour sinker right down the middle, put an excellent swing on it, long fly ball, deep center field. Cody Bellinger goes back. He's at the track at the wall, leaps up, and robs the home run from Fernando Tatis Jr. Honestly, I'm glad I stayed up to watch it because it was fascinating to watch Cody Bellinger playing in Rangers Stadium, so a National League team who doesn't play the Rangers. Well, I guess they did this year because it was West and West, so he would have had some experience this year, but in a normal year, wouldn't know anything about the field, but to perfectly time up when the grass is ending, when it's track, and now when it's wall, to time that jump and rob a home run because it was clearly out. I mean, it was gone by a good couple of feet. Bellinger got up there, robbed the home run, which kept the game at 4-3. Gratterall went nuts. Bellinger was going bananas. There was a bit of a back and forth exchanged after that. I'm not sure exactly why you would do this, but Gratterall threw his glove, threw his hat. Manny Machado started talking to him. Gratterall waved back. There was some adult language being thrown back and forth, and people were concerned, hey, does this carry over into the 8th inning? Well, things, the Dodgers were able to lighten the mood, so to speak, because they got 2 runs themselves in the bottom of the 7th inning. So it went from a 4-3 game with the Dodgers to potentially 5-4 Padres. Nope, robbed home run. Now 2 runs for the Dodgers next half inning, and all of a sudden it's 6-3 here as we're heading to the top of the 9th, and Kenley Jansen is getting ready to go in and close out the ball game. But Turner hit a sac fly and Muncy singled home those runs in the bottom of the 7th inning. Like I mentioned, there are now 2 outs in the bottom of the 8th here, and it's about to be Kenley Jansen time in the top of the ninth. But if this score holds here over the course of the next 15 to 20 minutes, if the Dodgers are able to take a 2-0 series lead, there's no word yet on who the starting pitchers are for tomorrow in this late matchup. I touched earlier on in the show how I said Yarborough should go for Tampa Bay. Well, it looks like Ryan Thompson is going to get the start, and he will be utilized as the opener for Tampa Bay. And Houston, still as of this point, is undecided in who will be their starting pitcher. But in the National League, it's very much looking like it'll be Dodgers versus Braves. Both of these teams ahead 2-0 in these series. I do expect the Padres and Marlins to fight here on Thursday and possibly extend the series. But eventually, Dodgers-Braves looks like the NLCS. And then on the American League side, it'll be fascinating to see if it'll be Houston and Tampa, and there will be some storylines to discuss here. But, oh, man, it's been a lot of fun talking to you guys about all the games that have taken place here over the last couple of days. Before I let you guys go, I will ask you one more time, wherever you're listening to this, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Alexa has its own podcast thing now. Pandora does podcasts. So wherever you check out your podcast, please like, rate, and review the podcast. Give us 5 stars. Leave a comment, as well as share this with one of your friends. I mean, if you guys enjoyed today's show, you guys enjoy the content here within the podcast network, send it to one of your buddies. Share it on social media and let them know, hey, check this out. Kev's a lot of fun. He's really breaking down every game, keeping you guys up to date, because by the time I talk to you guys again here on Sunday night for Monday's episode, we're going to be talking about the championship series. We're going to be breaking them down, ultimately giving you guys a preview. So ultimately, I'm going Dodgers, Braves, Tampa, Houston as my final prediction, but we'll know for sure, and we'll certainly discuss it on Sunday's episode. So have a great rest of your week out there, everybody. Continue to stay safe. Continue to, stay warm as it's becoming the fall season here across the country, or wherever you're listening internationally as well. I love and appreciate each and every one of you out there. So enjoy your week, everybody. I'm Kevin Mahalik. We'll talk to you guys again on Monday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.